Another thing that my mother is known for, which actually ties into my life, interestingly enough, is she also, in my community in the 60s, our Indian agent signed an agreement with the Department of Indian, or actually they signed an agreement, 33 municipalities around our community. So we're really in a heavily populated area. So 33 municipalities, they signed an agreement to dump their garbage on our reserve. And she said, in the beginning, it wasn't so bad. You know, they would dump like a roll of linoleum and suddenly everybody would have new floors in their houses. She says one time the Labatt's Brewery, which is just off the res, dumped an entire shipment of beer because the labels were upside down. A bunch of Mohawk guys were really industrious. They set up a bar right in the middle of the dump and sold beer for 5 cents. She says it wasn't so bad, but after many years and a lot of garbage, guess what came with it? Rats and mice, right? So she said, they started to complain, and they said to the Indian agent, oh, there's nothing, we can do. We already signed this agreement. It's been a few years. We'll see what we can do. She says, we can't take no for an answer. So finally, she got a meeting with the Minister of Indian Affairs. And before they left, they live trapped a bunch of mice and rats. I know for you Crees, that seems, why would you live trap anything? You trap it to kill it, right? But no. Sometimes people live trap. So she live trapped all of them, they live trapped, and they put them in a bag. And they put them in a box. And they drove to Ottawa. And my Uncle Frank likes to tell this story. He says, we were in this big room, and here's your mama on one side, and minister and all his cronies on the other side, and she's saying, you got to move this dump, it's horrible. And he says, oh, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do about it, blah, blah, blah. We have to maybe do a royal commission. We'll get back to you in a couple years. And he says, and he stops, he goes, do you remember what the pants looked like in the 60s? I said, what does that have to do with it? He goes, they were really big bell-bottoms. Even the guys with suits wore bell-bottoms. And he says, I looked at your mom, and she was getting madder and madder and madder. Then suddenly, she got calm. And she said, well, we have to live with the rats. You have to live with the rats. And that's when I knew. I bent down and tucked my pants into my socks. Out came this box. They opened it up, and rats came pouring out, rats and mice. And he said, man, those pants were like a highway for those rats, right up their pant legs. And you had these civil servants. He said, I've never seen them move so fast. They were jumping on tables, screaming for about 15 minutes. It was absolute chaos. And your mom, he says, you just sat there like that. And we're all, and her aunties, and they're all just staring at it. Meanwhile, everybody's screaming and everything. Well, guess what? The dump got moved. Imagine that. So fast forward 30 years, I'm home from the Olympics. I'm invited to this big conference in Ottawa, big sport conference, and to figure out why we are not winning more medals. And, suddenly the MC starts calling these names of people up on stage. So I didn't win a medal. I didn't win an Olympic medal. I came 5th at the Olympics. So I'm sitting there like the rest of them, but he starts calling the names like Donovan Bailey and Gaetan Boucher and some hockey players, and they all know each other, right? Because they're all medal winners. And they all look at each other, and they're shaking hands. They got the special handshake, how are your kids, what's going on? It's like an exclusive club. Suddenly my name gets called, and I'm like, why am I being called up? I'm like, I know why. I'm the only native to go to the Olympics that year from Canada and the States. So I get called up, and we're considered the mosaic of Canadian sport. And down the line, they're all looking at me like, who are you? What are you doing up here? Like, well, they didn't even know who I was. And the MC suddenly says, we have a special guest that wants to meet you famous Olympians. And I go, oh, I wonder who it is. And he goes, the Prime Minister of Canada. And I was like, in through the back doors, in walks. Does anybody, this little trivia, who knows the only Minister of Indian Affairs that went on to be Prime Minister of Canada? Does anybody know who it is? No, he wasn't the Minister of Indian Affairs. The only one, Jean Chrétien. And he was the Minister of Indian Affairs in the 60s. He tried to pass the white paper, right? Which would have eradicated our rights. So I look, and in walks, and everybody's, oh, so excited. I'm like, oh, great, Mr. White Paper's here. And I'm like, okay, be nice, be polite, don't be mean, don't punch him. Anyway, and he starts shaking the hand. He has this little aide that's whispering in his ear saying, oh, this is so-and-so. They want to medal at this Olympics. This is who they are. And shaking their hands. And when he gets to me and before his aide can say anything, he looks back and he goes, how is your mother? And I go, she's good. She's really good. And then all these athletes look at me like, why does he know your mother? And he goes, oh, she was a fighter, that Continetta. He says, oh, she kicked my ass, I said, yes, I know. And he goes, you make sure you say hello to her for me, okay? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I went home that night. And I said, guess what, Mom? Jean Chrétien says hi. And she goes, he remembers me? And I'm like, Mom, you let rats go in his office? Don't really forget people like that, right? So that was the kind of woman my mom was. If you couldn't get it one way, you found another way. And she never lost her sense of humor, right? And she was really, I think, like ahead of her time. And I know me and my sisters could not have done what we did without having someone who let us understand it was okay to live outside the lines, but also to be comfortable outside the lines.